today we are in where?
Fountain City. We're out of our jurisdiction, but we're going to
Right.
sneak out. We sent Mary up north, and they're following her. The jurisdiction
Yeah, yeah.
police are following her, and we snuck off. We went west.
And we're in Buffalo County, and we are going to look at something that I know nothing about, but Jim is going to tell us.
Well-
And what is this thing that we're going to start out looking at?
Well, this is a presentation being done for the Arcadia Historical Society.
Uh-huh.
Bob Keiper, a friend of ours, I said, from
Keiper.
Fountain City, he's our host here today.
Yep.
And he invited us down, and he had gone on a little bit of an exploration, and he found an item here he would like to donate to the museum, and we will curate it in Arcadia. And next spring, after May, you'll be able to come in and see what he donated to the museum. And I think what we could do now is ask Bob to explain what he found and maybe tell us a little bit about his adventures of getting it and what happened there.
Well, let's show it too, because right now people
All right,
have no
now
idea
it's a
what we're
secret.
talking
It's still a
about.
secret. He didn't find it until he said he found it.
Well, back in 2009, I got a call from a friend of mine saying that he and a couple of friends that he knew were going to go on an adventure up in northwestern Minnesota. And I said, well, what kind of an adventure is this? And he said, well, you'll have to come along. So on the way up, he said, well, we're going to stop by my place and pick up my canoe. And I thought, oh, we're going to go on a canoe adventure. Okay. But he was very quiet about what else we were going to do besides paddle a canoe. So as we're driving up to northwestern Minnesota, way above, well, let's see, what was the name of the town out there? A little town called Dalton.
Is that where they have the peat bogs and marshes?
That's exactly the area.
Okay.
It was all peat bog and marshes. And as it turns out then, we jumped in this canoe, pulled into a landing, jumped into the canoe and started paddling. And my friend Bill says, well, what we're after are buffalo bones. And I said, oh, so that's why you wanted me to bring these fiberglass poles with. And he said, yeah. He said, what we'll do is you and Gary will jump over the side of the canoe then. And he said, it's not very deep, but it's really deceptive because there's no bottom. And I thought, oh, well, not very deep. Okay. So we got to, followed a little creek through some cattail bog. And then the bog kind of opened up into a small pool about maybe 60 feet in diameter. But the cattails then were probably 10 feet tall. And I thought, well, I wonder what this is going to be like. And I looked over the side of the canoe and I thought, oh, the bottom is right there. I see what he means by shallow. Well, when I jumped over the side of the canoe, there was no bottom. It looked like sand, but it wasn't. So I thought, this is going to be interesting. So I took my little fiberglass probe, which is probably about 5 feet long, 4 or 5 feet long. And he said, just poke around and when it goes thump, 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 you're on a bone.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, well, this will be fun. And so I took a deep breath, went down and pulled out a rib bone.
So you're floating, you're swimming?
We're swimming.
Okay.
Yeah, in this slimy muck.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and so as we moved along, he said, what we're after are skulls. And he said, any skull that you find is worth keeping. And I thought, okay, so how old do you think some of this stuff is? And he said, I really don't know. And I said, okay, well, let's see what we can pick up here. And so within the first half hour, and now this is in September, so the water was on the cool side, it was about 63 degrees. And I thought, I don't know how long I can stay in this water. So I thought, well, okay, let's find some bones here. And all of a sudden, thump, thump, thump. And I picked out a skull. But it was a little bit more to it than that. I'm in about maybe 5 feet of water. And when I heard my rod land on the top of this skull, I thought, oh, okay, that should be no problem. So I went down and I could feel the top of the skull. And then I found one of the horn cores and I thought, oh, but there was so much suction because this thing had sat in the bottom of this bog. So when I went to pick it up, my feet went 2 feet down. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a problem if I can't get my feet out. And I had a pair of sandals on. He said, you better wear some kind of tennis shoes or sandals or something. And I went up to get a breath of air because I had loosened this thing up, but in loosening it up, it pulled me down. And I could only get my nose and my mouth for air. And I thought, this is
Not a good thing.
Not a good thing. Plus, it's 63-degree water, so your core temperature is beginning to drop. And when that happens, you cramp up.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about all of this stuff, and I thought, well, I'll go down one more time, and if I can loosen it up, then I'll bring it up. And then I brought up a bunch of other bones, too. I got the skull up, and my friend, who's also there, Gary, is about 30 feet away from me on another part of the bog. And he said, hey, I think I got a skull over here too. But he said, I don't know how to swim.
Oh, gee.
And I said, okay, well, we'll bring you over then. And bring the canoe over. And he held on to the side of the canoe then. And then I went down, found his skull, and I was smart enough to figure out a little bit at a time, and we wiggled out another skull. And I have some pictures of this stuff that you can take along and
Nancy
deal
will add
with that.
them in, yes.
Yeah. So we got everything into the canoe, and we realized with our weight and all the bones that we had collected, we're going to have to put some bones back because we were right up to the top of the gunnels with water. And anyway, so we threw a lot of the bones back, and I kept scapulas and the lower jaws, and all of that stuff went to a friend of mine up in Buffalo City. So that's the story on the buffalo skull. And as far as treating it, what I did when I got it home was I hosed it off really well, let it dry out. And then I took that 4-to-1 formula of Elmer's glue and water and just painted it. So that's been on this now since 2009. So
how do you think these buffalo wound up in that bog?
that bog was in a big bowl. I would think that the bowl was like one of those glacial lakes way back in the day, that the glacier had kind of gouged out. Mm-hmm. And so when that all of that ice and snow melted, it just was one big pothole down to bedrock. And I think these buffalo got in there during the winter, and they were in this little bowl, and they got hit with a blizzard, and it killed the whole herd. And wow. That's why all of those bones are there. But, you know, I'm not an archaeologist, but when I look at that surrounding, that's the only thing that I can come up with.
Makes sense, yeah.
You know,
so, one or two you could see getting stuck in the mud and not be able to get out.
Yeah.
But not that many bones in one pile.
Yeah, yeah.
So, is there any evidence that they were hunted?
Not that we were able to pick up, because we're in water, and all of the bones now have settled down to the bottom of this thing, and how far a stone tool would go down. And if you know, we're talking paleo times, and if you feel how heavy this is, you know, That's
It
a
is.
couple of pounds.
It's heavy.
That's going to go down a lot more than a bone would. So I would think that any of those
Yeah.
stone tools would be on the bottom someplace. But
So I mean, there wasn't any evidence
On the bones
on the
themselves,
bones, yeah, that
Right.
they got.
I know by Milwaukee, by Kenosha, they have bones there that bison and mastodon have been worked on.
Yeah.
If you had the right bones and you looked long enough, you might find some cut marks, but I suspect probably didn't look at the time.
Yeah.
you know, at
And
that
everything
time,
was muddy.
no. But I know where the bones are if I ever wanted to.
If you get younger, you might go back.
Yeah, yeah, that's the truth. But
So, when you say paleo, how many years ago is that approximately?
well, paleo times are about 9,000 to 13,000 years,
Okay.
you know, and
Wisconsin.
longer. Now they're beginning to see that there's activity in this land a lot longer than we ever
Yeah.
suspected.
Imagine,
They're
yeah.
thinking before the glaciers there were civilizations that were here. And how many periods of glaciation we had, at least 3 that I know of.
Yeah,
You know?
3, 4 for sure, and I
Yeah.
said that's only the bigger ones.
Right.
How many were wiped out? Once the glacier went across, it
Yeah.
left a tillage mark in the front. All the debris was piled there.
Yeah.
But if the next glacier went farther, it
Right.
erased the first one.
Yeah.
So you don't know what, you only have the evidence for the last ones as it receded.
Right, right.
So
Now, a few years back, I was in Ireland, where they have a lot of peat bogs.
Sure.
And what they keep finding in their peat bogs are human remains.
Oh, sure.
Have you seen? They look like they've been turned to leather, more or
Yeah,
less.
yeah.
Preserved by the peat and the
lack
minerals.
of oxygen, yes.
Right,
The
yeah.
water shields them.
Yeah.
So
And that's what
same
happened
principle
here. Lack of oxygen in that peat bog preserved these bones. And the photos will show you when we brought them out of the water, they were golden. They were completely clean and golden. And so when you look at the photos, you'll know what I'm talking about. And
Like I said, bison were here from, oh man, over 100,000 years, but they evolved in style. Bison antiquus had the big, long, straight horns.
Oh, yeah.
And as they evolved, the horns started coming to our modern bison, the
Yeah.
curved.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
still are partially straight, and so this skull is probably 2,000 to 5,000 years old, someplace, judging by the style of the horns.
So why do they think the horns changed and got smaller?
Evolution, I suppose, like
Yeah, but
everything
why?
else.
Yeah.
Why was it better to have the shorter ones than the long ones?
I have
That's
no
a
idea.
good question. Good
And there's no one
question.
around to ask. Nobody documented. How many times have we said document?
Yeah.
Bison,
Well,
Nobody documented why. Well, I said we appreciate the donation to the museum.
Yeah,
I
that's
said
great.
we'll get it ready for display to hang up in the museum. We'll note where it came from and tell a little bit of history about it. And I said, this is just one of Bob's hobbies. He does other hobbies too.
Sure.
So this will be in Arcadia for people to see at the museum this spring, correct?
You betcha. We'll get it up this spring. I said that we have some other bones down there, Paleo period or earlier. I said that they'll also be on display. So be an interesting addition to the museum.
And it's even got teeth, as I can see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can you see those?
That's okay. Yeah.
Jim
You're
is
okay.
photogenic,
You're good.
isn't
I'll
he?
move out of the way.
No, you can be here too,
You're okay.
because Bob has some other interest here too, besides walking around in peat bogs bringing up bones.
Yeah,
Correct?
that's correct.
Okay, so what is this thing that Jim just handed me here?
That's a jawbone paleo knife.
Really, this is a jawbone.
Yeah. Now, that's from a cow,
Okay.
but a buffalo jawbone is a little bit bigger.
Well, I would imagine.
And of course, the front of the jaw is joined, so you'll get 2 halves for the lower jaw. That's a lower jaw, you know.
So did you make this?
Yeah,
And what is this then?
that's what they call sinew.
Uh-huh.
And sinew is like your Achilles tendon. If you pound it, you can shred it and make a thread.
And that was how they helped fasten the point.
Absolutely, right.
Like the long strips on the loin. for deer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there you go. But
And,
anyway,
yeah.
and this is a stone blade that I made
Nice river.
many years ago.
And where did
Actually,
you
it's
get
Texas root beer. It looks a lot like Knife River Flint, but it's from Texas.
It's from Texas. Okay.
Yeah. So I like to work as many different types of stone as I possibly can. And that way, when I'm in a different part of the country, and I used to travel a lot to go to a lot of nap-ins where other flint nappers
What do
like
they call it?
myself.
Nap-ins?
Nap-ins,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, so you're going to learn all kinds of words.
Some we won't put on air.
Yeah, well, if I break something. Anyway, so I've been doing this for 50 some years. And
How did you get started?
back in 1970, I was on a canoe trip up in Lake of the Woods. I was pretty active in my younger day. And so I bumped into my first teacher, and he taught me how to do pressure flaking. And that's using, if I can find my antler here, that's using a deer tine and a piece of deer hide, like this.
Okay.
And then if I look at this is what we call a flake, in other words. I took a chunk of stone, and I'll show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the edge and put the tip of the antler right on the edge of the stone on the back side, just right on the very edge, and squeeze with my legs, and you'll hear a pop. Okay, so what that did was it took out a chip on the bottom side of the stone. So that's the technique that I learned back in 1970, and I could never get an arrowhead longer than about 2.5 or 3 inches. So I thought, well, there's got to be more to the story. So back in about late 80s, early 90s then, so from 70 to 80, I worked glass, stone, and porcelain from toilet tanks and that kind of stuff, because I didn't really know anything about stone, and there were no books around that I could read. I would read the Bureau of Ethnology stuff over at the college library, but there were really no picture books or reading material, because knapping was a thing that
Lost art.
it was a lost art
Yeah.
at that point. This is back in the 70s. Although there were some people that we call gray ghosts that were making things with mechanical tools, and they were selling stuff on Route 66 back in the 50s and 60s. And those we called gray ghost points. And we can still see some of those that show up at the artifact show.
Yeah, and lacrosse, I've seen a few there.
Yeah.
Extremely long points, but
Yeah.
flat, and you can tell that they're not made properly.
Yeah,
So were they trying to sell them as being old?
right.
Okay.
Right, and then
Right.
they would sell them. One of the guys, well, there was probably a handful that I know of, and each one had a certain style of point, and he made them out of. They made them out of certain types of stone, usually a lot of Texas stone. Texas had a lot of material to work, and Missouri was another type. But gradually, these beginning nappers kind of gave out some of their information, and there were more and more people that got involved in it, and it was somewhat lucrative. You know, for $5 you could get a paint can full of, we called them Mexican arrowheads, on the back of Mechanics Illustrated or in Boy's Life or something like that. Remember those?
You betcha, comic book.
Yeah, and that was another place that you could buy these things. In fact, I still have some of the first arrowheads that I had been given by different people, and of course, they're all curved. Then they had forgot about the aerodynamics of an arrowhead.
Just flake you on the edges off.
Yeah.
So the Mexican arrowheads,
Yeah.
they were being sold from the backs of comic books.
Yep.
And what were they being sold as?
Authentic arrowheads.
Okay.
Okay, so they were authentic stone arrowheads, but they weren't old.
Okay.
But they didn't say that they
Yeah,
were old.
okay.
But you just inferred if they were
Right.
stone, they're going to be old.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because who's making arrowheads out of
Yeah,
stone? Right.
And that's the same thing happens today as well. And I had been in numerous places where some of the authentic arrowheads that belonged in the museum were actually modern, sold to whoever it was that was donating
Yeah.
them. And that's why provenance is really important when you
Right. I suppose.
Document.
Document, right? Yes.
Document,
Yeah.
absolutely. So over the course of years then, what I was doing was I was traveling around to all these different knap-ins, and then I, for the last probably 25 years, I was more interested in what was happening in our area, because we didn't, at that point, have any rock to use. But, you know, I thought, well, that can't be true, you know, because I find arrowheads in the field.
Sure.
Native
Yeah.
Americans
You know,
are here.
so
Right.
if they were here and the climate may have been a little bit colder then, well, something just doesn't add up here.
And university didn't start yet. UWL didn't start till in the 80s.
Well, that's true. And I remember when Gallagher and
Bozart
Jim Thaler showed up,
Yeah.
and then Ernie had showed up, and I got to know Ernie pretty well, and I keep telling him I was finding stuff in my garden all the time.
Was that here in Fountain City?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, I was living in Winona at the time when I met Ernie, and then when I moved to Fountain City here, we'd have these little get-togethers, and, you know, of course, I was knapping stone, and then to fool Ernie, I mean, it was just a kind of a,
Yeah.
I'd say to him, hey, I just found like a paleo point in my garden. You want to look at it? And I'd pull it out of my pocket, and of course, it was all dirty, and I had just made it like that day. And I completely buffaloed him.
Really? Well,
He was
pretty good at it then.
He was young.
Yeah.
But that's when I realized that a lot of the archaeology students needed to know how the technique made
Was being
real
done
stone
and
things.
how to tell.
Right. And so that's when I said to him, you know, I could never do that. You know, so I had this big grin on my face, and I said, hey, look at this, you know, made out of Hickston, you know. And in 1974, I went over to Silver Mound for the first time. And that's when I realized that this was a quarry site. And I walked Heller's Field. Lake Heller owns like 3,000 acres where the water ski lake is now. And I've been there at least once or twice a year for the last, since 1974, 50-some years.
We're talking about over in Hickston, Silver Mound, which is right on 95, I believe.
Right on 95.
Right before you come into Elma Center. And there is a KOA, I think, campground there.
yeah.
Yes.
We have a nap in there.
Oh.
In fact, in May, we'll be getting together again. And of course, it's Well, that nap-in is later in the fall, usually in October, but over in Sparta is where they have a rendezvous, and we have a nap-in at Sparta. I misspoke, but that's coming up. But needless to say, there was more to the process than pressure flaking, which I discovered a number of years after I couldn't make more than a 3-inch point. So back in about 1992, a friend of mine said, you know, there's this guy up at Fort Snelling, and I saw him a couple weeks ago, and he said that he was going to be up at Pine City, and Pine City has an old fur trade post. And I would wondered if you'd like to come along, and I said sure. And that's when I met my second teacher, and he was using a moose billet.
A moose billet.
Yeah, this is moose antler.
Okay.
So every year, moose, like deer, shed their antlers.
Wow.
And if you feel this thing, you'll notice how heavy it is.
It's heavy.
Very dense.
Yes, it is.
And so Jim Regan, who's now passed away,
Here,
was,
I'll pass that along to you so
Yeah.
I can look at the moose billet.
yeah, well, there are different sizes.
Yeah, you can use deer antler, I says moose billet. Usually it's the base right off of the horn, right off
Okay.
the head. Take
Okay.
the pedicle off, you know.
Yep.
And there's a reason some are bigger and smaller. It's all got to do with the technique of flint napping.
And this is whitetail. A whitetail, the base of the antler. I've
Okay, this is
worn it down that
this would be
far.
attached to the head,
Yep.
Yeah.
to the skull.
Yeah,
Okay.
the rosette is worn off. Okay, so what Jim Regan was doing was he took a piece of stone. This is what we call Hickston, and this is an old biface. In other words, they had taken a hammerstone, and that's what we
Right.
find out in the field.
And that's granite, isn't it?
Well, this is,
Is it? Or not?
well, we call it greenstone. If I were
Okay.
to, and this is another one.
It's some type of basalt. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a hard metamorphic.
And-
It could be a metamorphic rock, but
and-
usually it's a...
You can tell that somebody was using. This is an artifact. This is one stone that I've been using for the last, I don't know, 30 years, and you can see how beat up it's on
And
both
the
ends.
pieces that are missing from strikes. And when it has a tube,
Yeah.
it breaks
Right.
a piece off.
Sure.
So this I found out in the field, Heller's Field.
And you'll find them broken in
And-
half.
These big flake scars that you see were from the man working on the stone. Now I've got a piece of Hickston right at your feet here, and I'll show you
Oh,
basically
back here.
how that's going to work. Okay, so I don't want to use that one. So what I'm going to do is, this is a moose hide. It's, 1/4 inch thick.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is, I look at this piece of stone and I see this vein in here. That's the good part of this piece of Hickston. So what I have to do is, I have to use a hammerstone to thin this out. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to try to get all this sandstone off to get at this vein in here. So I'm going to kiss this corner, and you'll see by using the hammerstone, you can knock these big spalls off.
They call them spalls.
Spall, yeah, S-P-A-L-L. Okay, so what I want to try to do is I want to try to thin this baby down. So I see that this black line here is an old crack that's been healed, and hopefully that will break off. And I look at the stone in here because there are imperfections in stone that need to you need as a napper to be aware of. because you don't want to get through a piece and suddenly you find a crack. Now here's a crack that just showed up here. And that's one of the first things that you need to do is to eliminate the cracks. So rather than to come this way and wreck my good quality glassy line, I'm going to turn it this way first. Whoops. There we go. And you'll notice that the stone here is solid, but when I run my finger over it, it's not glassy, it's rough like sandpaper. So that tells me that this part of the stone is not very good, but it still flakes in these conchoidal fractures, and that's what flint knapping is basically all about, is learning how to thin, learning what tools that you need to work with to get at the best part of the rock, all kinds of things like that. So you'll find all of this spall material at a quarry site, and in our area we've got, let's see, several quarry sites. Well, we got Hickston, Silver Mound, and then we have Grand Meadow, just southwest of Rochester off of I-90, named after the Grand Meadow Church. And let's see, where else?
Cochrane Church we have
We've
here.
got Cochrane right up the pike here, and I've worked Cochrane. I've got a couple of frames of Cochrane points, and so all of the frames of points that you see here, except those two big cases and some other cases that have artifacts in, our work that I've done over the years. And I've probably given...
How many points do you make in a year
Well,
as a hobby?
I would say this last year, in 2023, I made probably 500 or 600.
Oh my goodness.
And there's...
So basically, we're pretty poor here for having a good rock. You can't just use a piece of crushed rock off your driveway to make an arrowhead.
Or not limestone anyway.
No, not every stone is knappable. But we do have lots of areas in the Midwest here that provide really good stone. We have, well, let's see, mostly cherts. We have Knife River flint that comes from North Dakota. I've got some obsidian, but the closest source of obsidian is Yellowstone. And Yellowstone obsidian, if you think you're going to just go out there and pick it up off the road, you better look around, because if you're in the park, it'll be a big find. And they got these guys with these monster sets of binoculars that can read a quarter's date, you know, if you held it in your palm. And then that's another story. You can't, on private property, if you talk to the landowner, he'll allow you to walk and pick up arrowheads or whatever. But on state property or federal property, no, you can't take anything. I'm going to set this piece down.
Where did you get this piece?
At Hickston, Silver
It was
Mound.
was that Silver
Yeah.
Out of
Mound?
the field, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't take off the mound itself.
No.
Part of the mound is privately owned.
Right.
A lot of it belongs to Conservancy now.
What I was going to say is, you know, if you're interested in that sort of thing, archaeology and artifacts and all of that, you need to talk to the landowner, and of course you got to obey the laws that are out
Sure.
there. You know,
Well, that makes
But that's all
sense.
part of it. And the other thing is, when you, and if you are a flint knapper, you sign your work, and that's what I have these diamond scribes for. So I can sign my work when I finish a piece. So if we were to make a small point out of this, then what I'll do is I like to scribe my name, and then I'll put the date. $2025 on a piece of stone like that. And then I'll take my nose oil and rub it, and you can't see that it's there. So if it shows up on eBay and somebody is selling, one of my pieces, and that has happened, unfortunately it has happened. And I used to do the marker, but that doesn't stay on very often. So anyway, so that's basically what happens. But let me do some other knapping here for you, and after a while, I'll let you know. Okay, this gets really personal for the napper because he's trying to make something out of this piece of stone, and even though there are flake scars on it, I know that somebody was pounding on this a number of years ago. And there may be patina on the outside of this. And patina is oxidation. And let's see, do I have anything here? Sometimes you can look at, okay, here's an ancient tool here. And a lot of times on some of these tools, you'll see that the oxidation makes this stuff really almost creamy white. And in order for it to get, like this area in through here is where it was oxidized. In other words, it had, part of it was sitting out in the sun, and there'll be it looks like skim milk that is over this whole piece. And in order for that to happen, they figured that that's anywhere from 500 to 1,000 years just to get the skim milk look. But some of this stuff is just really thick, and it's like 1/8 of an inch thick. And I've found pieces of Knife River flint that are perfectly white on one side, and when you flip them over, they're just as brown as that blade in that.
Yeah.
Like a beer bottle.
Absolutely.
The root
right.
beer. Huh?
So you know that it's taken a long time for that to happen.
Yeah, so the material itself is 450 million years old.
Yeah. So,
Hickston quartzite, 500 million years old.
and you just don't know, Oh, here's another little story too. And let's just stick with Hickston. I'll put this piece of chert down because that came out of Missouri. But Hickston, I was walking the same field that I've walked for 50 years. And I kept finding broken pieces like this. And I thought, oh, that's the base of a big blade. And I thought, that guy had a bad day because he just lost, a quarter.
The end of it, yeah.
The end of it. And then I walked about 10 feet further, found another one. And I thought, oh, this one's a little bit more worked. And I thought, he had a bad day too. Must have been the same guy. A few more feet, found another one. And I thought, okay. Then I thought, wait a minute. I picked up another piece, and this one had sandstone on it. And I thought, oh no. And I went back and I picked up all these other pieces, and I realized this has been worked. This is a knife. A flaked knife, and all of these were butcher tools. So then I thought, well, what's interesting about Silver Mound is there were people there from paleo times all the way up to modern times. And you'll find little triangle pieces, you find bullnose thumb scrapers, and in my cases here, I've found lots of different types of tools. You'll find, here's a hammerstone. This last fall, I went out there just for the heck of it, There it is. And I'm thinking, okay, I wonder if there were right and left hand nappers. And guess what? There was.
Sure.
And when I go to the nap-ins too, there's lefties out there, you know. So it's just a matter of finding the tool, looking at it, and then put it in your hand and feel, you know, how would I use this, you know?
How would you hold on to it?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So a lot of it is with feel. So in talking with archaeology students, and what I used to do is I'd take a big tub, fill it full of dirt, corn stalks, and everything that I could throw in that would be a natural field walk, and say, okay, here's the deal. Look and see what you can find. Don't dig, because that's a no-no. Anything on the surface, it's okay, you know. So let's just see what you can find. And so I would walk through the field and find where there would be concentrations of chips. And I'd pick up a chip and think, oh, that's Prairie du Chien. I know this stone because I've worked it before. Oh, this is Hickston. This isn't very good Hickston though. This is the garbage. You know, this is like number 3 grade, not the candy. So then I'd be looking around and I'd find hammerstones. A lot of the arrowheads have already been picked up, but all the tools are still there. And so anyway, that's was part of my learning process. And then I would teach that when I give my knapping classes to some of the archaeology students and give them a good idea of what it is that they're looking for, because their eyes haven't really tuned into that sort of thing. You know,
and the thing is, you know, like the style of the points has evolved. I mean, they started out with the fluted point, which is really an experienced napper.
Right.
Not anybody could flute.
Right.
And then you ended up, by the time the European settlers came here, we were down to little bitty triangles.
Yeah.
You know, which was kind of a reverse technology, but yet the same principle. You still had to do your percussion. You still had to do your
Pressure flaking, you bet.
flaking. Everything had to still be in there. But we've lost, I said, they'd lost some of the skills, and I think because of modernization, they evolved. We went from Ice Age mammals down to hunting deer to wildlife, you know, small game.
Yeah.
So that all changed.
You know, and I was going to show you this too. Our natives in this part of the country had one other little tool that a lot of southern tribes didn't have, and it's this stuff.
Copper.
Copper. Oh, that is heavy.
Yeah.
That's really heavy.
And copper made great knapping tools. And that's what we call float copper, and up in northern Wisconsin, and even in some of the fields around here, you'll find copper pieces that were actually hammered out by these Native Americans. They figured out that if they could heat this stuff up and smash it with stones, hammer stones, it makes great ornaments. And on top of this case over here, you'll see some copper, modern copper tools that other nappers had made and given to me over the years. And so, like I said, there were this whole thing about flint knapping and has led me down so many different paths. It's just really amazing over the years that I've been doing this.
And it's the same technique, no matter if it's a small piece or a large piece. You still have to take off from the thicker side, work down to the thin side,
Right.
to get your baseline on. You only can remove a flake if you're off the lower half. You turn it the other way, and you just smash the piece. You have to figure your center lines out. It's not a matter of just smashing 2 rocks together. It just takes years and years of technology and experience.
I got to ask you about this one because I found a point. I grew up on Decorah Prairie down by Galesville. And I had found a point that I just treasure.
Uh-huh.
But it's this color, and it had all the little dots in it.
Oh, sure.
And I was told that was from a quarry that was north of Silver
Johnson
Mound.
Quarry?
Yeah.
Well, Johnson's
Isn't
or
it
Jacobs
Johnson
or
Quarry?
something.
John's Quarry.
John's Quarry, yeah. Is that where this is from? Do you know?
No, this is Hickston.
Okay.
John's Quarry has we call it poppy seed.
It's a little black
Yeah, it
speck.
has little
Yeah.
black specks
Yeah.
in it.
And it looks
yeah.
just like poppy seeds.
It does.
In
That's
fact,
right.
I've got some poppy seed points because I used to go to that quarry and pick stone
Yeah.
for knapping, and we call it. Oh gosh, why can't I come up with a name? Anyway, the Creasel cash is made out of that stuff, and what's the name of that? Anyway. But what I was going to show you is, okay, now this is just a spall flake. It really isn't anything. You know, there's a little bit of workmanship, but nothing. So I can theoretically work this piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand on the top of my lap pad, and I'll just show you how it's done. Okay, now see, there was a crack in that piece, and I wanted to break that off.
Okay.
And you can see
Yeah.
where the crack was, okay? So the napper has to be able to thin out his pieces, work through all of the problems, and begin to fashion a tool. Now, whether it's going to be an arrowhead or anything like that. Okay, come on there, Robert. There we go. So what you see then are, if you work along the edge and you look at where this edge is, now you'll see it makes this big bend over in this part. That means if I wanted to, I could reach down here, and I'm going to do a process called abrading. So by abrading down, I get rid of a lot of that weak edge that would normally crush when I hit it with my antler tool and give me an incomplete flake, and it would hinge. In other words, it would break in a straight line, and I'll show, hopefully I can do this and make a bad shot. Okay, there. Okay, now this should make a hinge, and hinges are not the napper's friend. So what you have to do is you have to figure out, how do I get that out of there? And you look at any of these ancient pieces that are in the museum, and you'll see that they had the same problem as we do today. And in order to get at that hinge, I have to do it one of two ways. Either I can come from directly opposite and set it up to take a nice big flake, or I can go out, use the hinge as a ridge. So ridges and hinges are two different things that you need to understand. And ridges are your friend. Okay, now let's just let's just see what I can do here. So first thing I do is I'll abrade. Now flip it over, and I'll lay my finger underneath. There's the first flake. Work on this a little bit more. And sometimes you might have to change your, up your game a little bit and switch to a different tool.
A lot of times they would use copper because I said it was available, but they used antler, wood, a good hard piece of wood.
Okay, well let's use our piece of copper here, and What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this edge up. Hopefully I won't break it. There. So,
And now it's already a tool that you can use for skinning a rabbit or doing some cutting.
right.
You don't have to necessarily make it into an arrowhead, but they could always convert until they finally use the stone right up. So we would find a lot of times the debitage that he's making, and they'll take and roughen edge, use it for skinning purposes or whatever, scraping, and then they toss it. We did the job, we'll get another one, but there's
Yeah.
plenty of scraps. They right in a quarry site, they make a preform, a giant piece like this, maybe twice as long, 3 times as long, a little bit wider. They took the good piece home with them, and they could work on that at their leisure. And as they needed more tools, they took them off of there. They took a nice flake off. They took the good part of the rock. So you'll find a lot of debitage, and it comes in different colors. Some is caused by heat treating, which was another technique they used a lot of times for taking a chert to make it more workable, but it kind of made it not quite as durable. And I said you can find Hickston in every color from black through red and oranges and browns. White and gray are kind of the more common. But it was just a matter of experience. You only could make the tool your father had shown you how to make, because that's the one grandfather had showed him. But through evolution, hunting deer versus hunting mastodon or bison, you used a lighter head. You went to the atlatl versus a spear. You went to the bow and arrow versus the atlatl. So I said, as technology changed, I said evolution's changed, techniques changed. But the basic principle, when he naps, whether it's by percussion or hammer stone, you're taking a flake off with the same principle as a BB that hits a window. It's a circle, but he's only using one half of that circle. And the pressure point is where the BB would hit, and it flakes off that half the circle. And every flake that falls, even if it's a small one edge will come right to a razor edge, and the other edge will be the platform of percussion. That's the pressure point that he used to take that flake off. So when you find these little oatmeal flakes in the field,
Yeah.
there's a good chance somebody is either resharpening the tool or he's making a tool. Archaeologists will study it. If there's cortex on the edge of a stone, well, that was the first stages of taking a rock right from a quarry site, working that off. That's the outside exterior of a stone. But once they got the inside and they got into the good part, then you'd have just a pure flake. You're down to a stage 2 or a stage 3 flake. There's more technology and knowledge to it than it's just a matter of taking a rock and smashing a finger, and you can't sharpen it, it's too blunt.
And that was my question: is did the Native Americans, did they sharpen these?
Oh, of
They
course.
All the
sharpen,
time, yeah.
That's why we'll find points, some are maybe 6, 8 inches long. And the next time you look, you find, well, it's just a little stub that they tied on. It's wore down that hard.
Sure,
It's been
okay.
resharpened,
Yeah.
reused, broken and resharpened again. And some of it was, I found one. It's not my style, but I can make it work because it's a good stone.
Yeah.
And the stone too has to be fresh. That's why the Silver Mound, a lot of the quarries, they dug for the stone. They didn't want something that was all frost cracked and dried out. When the moisture goes out of a stone, it works harder.
So they would dig down and get something.
They
that
try
was-
to get a fresher quality piece, yes.
You'll see how far nappers have come in more modern days. Now what I'll do is I'll switch over to a modern pressure flaker and a hand block. And when I would teach my napping students, I would say, use the biggest muscles in your legs. Because they can give you the power that you need to remove the flakes that are giving you a problem.
And I always think about, it's interesting that the trade routes, because they have found the Hickston rock all the way down in like Mississippi and places.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's just a simple side notch arrowhead. And actually, these are not arrowheads, but dart points.
Yeah.
Dart points are more like a little bit, anywhere from 2 inches to 2.5, but over an inch. So
So a dart point, what would it be attached to?
a spear thrower.
Okay.
An arrow, the distance between the 2 notches, like for an arrow, would be like 1/4 inch or less.
Yeah.
Because it has to be a
Oh,
small light
okay.
head. You put something
Sure.
like this on the end of it, you couldn't throw it very far.
Yeah.
And when we have the artifact show March 1st,
Right.
they
Yep.
usually try to get a napper. Bob used to get there once in a while.
Uh-huh.
A little surgery here in the hip for once or twice.
Yeah,
Slacked them off a little bit.
And a heart attack.
Oh dear.
So I said it kind of slacked them off a little bit. But I said,
Yeah.
there's always somebody at the artifact show. I said, like you said, university will help.
Right.
I said, type it in on Google.
Sure.
I'm sure that
Yeah.
will bring up somebody.
YouTube is great,
Okay.
but there's nothing like watching somebody
to
Do
learn
it.
the technique.
do it.
Yeah.
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 It doesn't
Yeah.
just press on a rock, it'll come apart. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
Been there, done that,
Great.
tried that trick.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to thank Bob very much for giving us quite the tour and the demonstration here, and the bison skull.
That's
Oh,
especially-
absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for
Don't
the
forget
call.
to take that.
Yep.
Get that put up.